you have said across multiple interviews now, both in your and then also in your book, all over the place, that being a federal prosecutor, being a prosecutor or state prosecutor, the district attorney was the best job that you ever had, or at least your maybe most favorite or most fulfilling thing that gave you most meaning in life. Why was it that and nothing else that you did?
Well, number one, I loved it. There is no feeling in the world like standing in front of 12 people that you don't know and persuading them.
Hmm.
And I like persuasion. Politics right now is about ratifying what people already believe. You go find out what they believe and you repeat it back to them and they clap. And
Pander.
you don't need to be really good to do that. Persuading is taking people who are told this person is presumed innocent and convincing them beyond a reasonable doubt and doing it in a fair way.
Hmm.
I mean, there are rules in court and you got to follow those rules. So it's a system where the result and the process both matter. In politics, the result is all that matters. Okay, so I ran a negative ad that wasn't true, but I won.
Hmm.
Or so I took down a bunch of my opponent's yard signs in the dead of night, but I needed to because it's really important that I win. But that's not the way the justice system works. You have to do it the right way.
Hmm.
So I loved it. I was okay at it. And there's just a feeling you get. I had a case, Travis, where, imagine these parents, their daughter had been dead a decade and no one had been arrested. No arrest, no prosecution. So after a decade, you can see the grief etched on their faces. You're a parent. It's one thing to lose a child, but to not know who and why, you could literally see the marks of grief on their face. And to be able, after a decade, to go into a courtroom and convict the person who did it, there's just a bond that develops between the survivors or the victims of crime. And a sex assault where you survive, but you feel powerless and you're afraid and you're scared. And so I wanted the last image that young woman had was the man being led out in shackles and leg irons. That's the image I wanted. So she could say, you know what? He doesn't have the power. There's nothing in politics that compares to that.
Yeah. In your book, you talked about how being a prosecutor started to kind of wear on you, or this is, I think, being a federal prosecutor started to wear on you a little bit. And you were trying to make the decision, or it was kind of the beginnings of making the decision to leave that, because you said over half of the cases that you tried were drug cases. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that you were realizing that just the way that the laws were set up, that it was not comparable or not proportional. Yes. Thank you. It was not proportional to what the crime was. And you would have somebody who is in child pornography that would get 6 months more than somebody who had cocaine with intent to distribute, even though they had not committed any violent crimes. They had not been a part of any sort of,
Right.
negligible activities at that point, other than they had the possession of it with intent to distribute, but they were getting basically the same as these people who were committing atrocities. I guess my question would be, how did seeing that on a front lines level alter your ability to have empathy for others that grew up in a completely different way than the way that you grew up?
Oh, I think people will tell you, particularly when I became a state DA, if you hurt someone, I was tough on you. For economic crimes, which I consider drugs to be an economic crime, I did what I had to do, but I didn't put my foot into it.
Yeah.
When you see someone, an elderly couple beaten to death with a hammer, that is something to get really, really animated and pour your heart and soul into.
No kidding.
When you have a kid that grew up with nothing and he is selling marijuana or cocaine powder or cocaine base, that is an economic crime to me. It is not a crime of violence. And I think there's a really, really disparate way that I view those cases. And so when I was a federal prosecutor, I didn't do violent crime cases. I only did one. I did one murder case, and that's rare. Some carjackings, but not what you get in state court. But even then, I get this guy life without parole for methamphetamine dealing. And Susan Smith, who drowned her 2 sons, and whose husband I still run into in my hometown. Talk about the grief etched on someone's face. Wow. Still seeing. So she's eligible for parole. She drowned her 2 sons, and she's eligible. And this meth dealer, and look, I'm not into meth. You shouldn't sell meth. Yeah. I mean, period.
To be clear, yeah, caveat. Yeah.
But there's no comparison.
Right. No,
between being a meth dealer and drowning your kids.
Not even close.
So I needed to leave the federal system, and then I had to leave the state system. I don't want to ruin the end of the book for you. By the way, I live in the end, if you're wondering. I don't want you to flip through to the very end. I do live in the end, but not forever. I had to leave it all together because, what little bit of faith I had left was just frayed. Just seeing act of depravity after act of depravity after malice. I couldn't reconcile it, Travis, with what I was hearing on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to put that into perspective when you just try to go about regular life after that. And this is happening in, post 2000 South Carolina, United States. It breaks your heart to think about what's happening in these other countries that have even more broken judicial systems than we do. And yeah, it's happening all over the planet.